Hey guys, welcome back. I want to start a series of videos that gets back to the basics of mixing, of audio. And I know maybe a little bit boring to you guys who already know, but for the guys who don't know yet, I think this is going to be very important. And who knows, you may learn something even if you have been doing it for a long time. I know that I learn something all the time. So, hey, before we get started, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button below and hit the bell icon for notifications so that you'll know whenever these videos come out, okay? Okay, so here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with probably one of the most overlooked buttons on your console, one of the most overlooked plugins that you can have, and that is the filter. So you may be asking, what is a filter? Well, a filter is like, think of it like this. It's like a big screen, right? And that screen will only let things of a certain size through, right? That's what you sift things. That's what you sift gold and sand and water. You put water through it, and it only lets a certain size through it, and it keeps everything else. That's what a filter is. A filter is an electronic circuit that only allows certain things above or below, depending on if it's a low pass or a high pass filter. It only lets. So let's talk about a high pass filter first, because that's the most common thing. And a high pass filter, or low cut, could be called. It allows the highs to pass through. So it's a high pass filter. Now it affects lows, so some people get them confused and get them backwards, but they're actually, it allows highs to go through. So it's a high pass filter, okay? On the other hand, a low pass filter is a certain device that only lets things below a certain frequency. So it lets the lows pass, okay? So you may be asking, why is it so overlooked? Why are people not using it, and they should be? Because what happens when you have let's just take a guitar, for example, an acoustic guitar, for example, okay? If you're playing an acoustic guitar and it's the only thing playing, then you want that acoustic to have its full frequency spectrum. If you get a nice big round sounding guitar like say a Breedlove or a Martin or a big Gibson or something like that, it's going to have a lot of low end in it, right? And if that's the only thing playing, then you probably want all of that low end to be just glorious, right? But the second you add a vocal to it, then you have to make room for that vocal, right? And a vocal also has lows in it, right? A voice has some low frequency stuff. Sometimes if things are in the background, like this fan that's humming in the background, or an air conditioner outside, that's generating low frequency. And what a high pass filter does, or a low cut, is it cuts the lows, and it makes room for that. On an acoustic guitar, when you add a vocal, then you have to make room for that vocal in the guitar track. When you add a bass guitar, that bass guitar needs room to work too. And if you've got a lot of low frequencies coming from the acoustic guitar, then you have to make room for that bass by using a high pass filter on the guitar, or something to make room for those two instruments, right? So other examples might be an electric guitar. How many times have you recorded an electric guitar and the electric is just huge and booming and like a big huge Marshall stack, really loud, it's exciting the room, and there's a ton of low end in it, and then when you try to put it in the mix, it takes over everything. The drums sound small, the bass sounds small. Well, it's usually because you haven't filtered the electric guitar yet. I usually take a filter. I'll tell you how I do this in just a second. It's easy, and you should be using a filter on either be using a filter on every track, or have it ready for every track, okay? If you're not using it, you might need to use it, especially if you're a live engineer, because sometimes you'll get feedback. from a bass guitar or an acoustic guitar or something like that, and usually they'll feed back in the low end because they start to resonate. Well, the second you turn on that high pass filter, it eliminates that feedback loop, right? So we talked about some of the things that you might use it on. Vocals, I use it on every vocal track I do. Acoustic guitar, very popular. Electric guitar. Here's one. Reverb. Reverb sometimes has a lot of low end in it that muddies up the track. So you might want to add a filter on the low end of the reverb. We haven't talked about it a whole lot yet, but what about filtering the high end? What if cutting the top end? I do that on delay all the time. It's one of the first. I hardly ever use delay without using a filter on it, because what you don't want when you have a delay of a person, like when you have a vocal delay like that, the delayed part, you usually don't want to sound as good as the vocal because it becomes distracting. Because have you ever been messing with the delay and it just starts to feed back and just keeps going? Those get distracting. What you want to do is kind of shave off some of the top end of that, right? So that it decays and dies a little bit every time it delays. And that way you can use more of it and it not become distracting. So use it on vocals, use it on delay. You might even use a filter for the top end, or a low pass filter on the top end of a reverb, just to keep the reverb from being too distracting. Sometimes you want things to not be so high fidelity. Sometimes, well, most of the time when we record tracks, when we record ourselves, we try to get the most accurate picture of the instrument we're recording. We don't go and filter the lows and the highs off of that just because we want it to sound pristine and natural. So when you're mixing, that's when it becomes important for you to use that, because that's when you start making creative decisions on whether or not you should use a filter. Okay, so low pass, high filter, and high pass filter. Now let me tell you just a couple of mistakes that I see people do when they use filters, high pass filters and low pass filters, or low cut and high cut. Okay, a lot of times people will say that you need to filter every instrument that's not kick, bass, and low pad or whatever. That's not necessarily true, and you don't want to just like set a frequency and filter everything below that, because your song is probably going to end up sounding kind of not great, because you want to be diplomatic about where you cut things, because you want there to be this balance of frequencies. We're going to talk about EQ in an upcoming video, but you don't want to just like just cut off stuff like cut it off like 12 dB per octave or 24 dB per octave. Now you want to be a little bit more diplomatic than that. So that's why we use the slope, or how intense that filter is. A lot of times you'll see like 6 dB per octave, which means this in a nutshell. If you're cutting at 120, then 6 dB per octave means that at 60, which is an octave lower than that, it will be 6 dB down. Okay, and then an octave lower than that, which is 30, will be 12 dB down from the original cut. Now, if you go 24 dB, you can see how fast that could become pretty drastic, right? So you want to be diplomatic, and you don't want to just like blanketly cut things without discretion. You want to use your ears, but you want to know also that there's a lot of energy down there that you don't need, and that will get in the way of your tight low end mix. One other thing is that you don't factor in the fact that in the low end, it's so much easier to get things out of phase, right? Because those sine waves, those waves that make the sound, are further apart and a lot easier to cancel out. So sometimes you don't factor in the fact that the kick drum and the bass may be fighting with each other. So you can I even use a filter on bass guitar, believe it or not, and kick, and you can kind of shape the sound a lot by using those filters. I've even seen people do this, and I've done it myself, where even without EQ, no boosting or cutting any frequencies in the middle, just using high pass filters and low pass filters, you can shape a mix without any drastic EQ. Just get the things cleaned up that need to be cleaned up, and you will be surprised at how much more mileage you can get with just filters. Okay, so that in a nutshell is filters. I hope that you can go grab a song and go experiment with some filters, because I know that if you learn to do this, you will be a better mixer. So if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel, and also hit the bell icon, and I would love to let you know when I go live with another video again, and start teaching more and more of these basics of mixing. Thanks for coming today, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.